with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, on the Friday Sports Show, Salford City Radio, 94.4 FM, the Friday Sports Show for your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you all the news from the local area and around the world. And we are very fortunate in this show to bring you some of the world's top athletes, sports people, people who work in coaching, and many different disciplines related to sports. But also we've been covering a segment for a while now that speaks to people in the field of psychology and mental health as well, and related fields. We've had, really privileged to get some of the top people in the world talk about their work, and there's been some fascinating insights. Today we have a sports psychologist who is going to give us an insight into the world of sports psychology, which is really, really fascinating and really relevant. It's been relevant for a long time, but possibly even more so in the world we live in today for athletes. Her work is as a consultant. She consults many top athletes, and she also works with governing bodies like Swim England, but she does many, many more things as well, and no doubt she'll give us an insight into her work and what she does. Helen Davis, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Oh, thanks, Jim, for inviting me on, and I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences with sports psychology to everybody.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. The work that you do is, really fascinating. And just for our listeners, Helen, could you give us a bit of an insight into the work that you do? Your work's really, really, you sort of work in a lot of different areas, and just to give our listeners a bit of an insight in terms of the work that you do, what work you're involved in.
Yeah, I think I've got I'm very fortunate. I have a real variety with my job of things that I do. As you said, I do a lot of work in swimming and have worked with Swim England for a number of years now, where I support athletes from regional level all the way through up to the kind of top performance squad swimmers. And as part of that, it may be that I go and support swimmers at swimming tournaments that they do, run workshops, go and visit them on development camps, and work one-to-one with swimmers as well. I also have my own kind of private consultancy where I work one-to-one with athletes, and I've worked in a whole range of different sports with athletes from all different levels, which is really, really fascinating. For me, it doesn't matter what level the athlete is. I really enjoy getting to know them, finding out what it is that they would like to work on and how I can support them with that. So I do a lot of, one-to-one work, I would say, but I also do some work with teams as well. So I do a lot with the Cambridge University women's rowing crews in preparation for the boat race. So I work with those athletes all the way through from the kind of the start of their academic year in September all the way through and leading up to the boat race to help them prepare for that, because it's a very, very interesting event from a psychological point of view, because on that one day, these athletes who are university students and doing various courses at the university become the centre of the world's attention. But so many millions of viewers watch the boat race on television, and they're really thrust into the limelight during that day or that week anyway, in the lead up to the boat race. So it's very challenging psychologically for them. So that's a fascinating role that I do.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating what you do. And I mean, what inspired you in the beginning to go into the role, Helen? What was your inspiration to go into sports psych?
Well, I've been a teacher for 25 years in primary education, and I was feeling a bit stale in that role, to be honest. I'd been doing it for, such a long time, and I was always interested in sport. Sport had always been a very much part of my life, and for a few years I've been training with the Cambridge Marathon Club. I'm very fortunate to have really top-level athletes swimming and training with me. And I got very interested in involved in their performances and hearing about their racing that they did. And they were very negative about their swimming particularly, and it was almost like their races got going once they got onto the bike. And so I just became really curious about the attitude that they had towards swimming, and I began to wonder, well, if they changed their mindset towards their swimming, could it actually alter their performance? And I guess I then started reflecting about myself and my own swimming performance. I've been a master swimmer for many, many years and competed at national and international competitions, and I hadn't really ever paid much attention to my own psychology and how it could potentially benefit me and my racing. So I just got on the computer and started doing some Googling, and I'd done a psychology degree many years previously, and I saw that there was a master's in sport and exercise psychology. I read what the course was all about, And I just felt so excited. I thought I would love to do this. It was so fascinating. And before I knew it, there I was in my early 40s, enrolled on a distance learning master's course. And that took me on to further training to become a sports psychologist. So it was quite a long time, so I had to be really committed to doing it, but I absolutely loved it, and it was like a breath of fresh air in terms of having a change of career.
That's really inspiring, and our listeners are possibly contemplating changing careers, and obviously the world's a changed place at the moment, and people obviously, in terms of job roles and looking what's out there. That's really inspiring. And did you feel that your background, Helen, in teaching helped you a lot as well? Was that a big plus for you to sort of communicate with the athletes as well?
I really think it has been of enormous benefit to me, and I think I totally underestimated what teaching has actually given me in terms of the role that I now do as a sports psychologist. As a teacher, I had to learn to be extremely flexible. I was working with different people of different abilities. I was dealing with parents, wider families, and those are all things that I do as a sports psychologist. I was faced with difficult and challenging situations, performance-related issues, yes, academic, but again, that can translate to sporting performance as well. So I think I've realised as I've gone through my training as a sports psych how much that teaching has actually given me, and I really look back on the role that I had as a teacher now through a different pair of eyes, really, and really value what it's doing.
Absolutely, and I guess our listeners are wondering in terms of what a sports psychologist does to help athletes, and we've sort of spoken to sports psychologists on the show before, and I mean, I guess everyone has their own way of working, and what in terms of yourself, I mean, how do you sort of help athletes using sports psychology? What do you do to help athletes? Our listeners are probably wondering what you do to help them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard thing to define because sports psychology can kind of capture so much, really, and it really depends on what the athlete is presenting me with when I meet them, and I think that can be a whole host of different things, and a lot of people think, people come to see a sports psychologist because they've got an issue or problem, and that's not the case at all. A lot of people are just trying to enhance their own performance. They want to learn to think better, or it may be that they want to help their team in terms of group performance. And so, for me, it's about being able to, get to know that person, get to know and build a relationship with that person, hear and listen to what it is that they really want to work on, and by using my skills in good questioning, I guess, as to find out how I can help them to optimise their behaviour and their performance. Sometimes, people come and talk to me about something, and the conversations evolve, and we may even take different directions. But I guess for me, it's about developing a person's resources to be able to cope with the demands of their sport. As I mentioned, I work in a lot of different sports, and of course, I'm not an expert at all in these sports. But for me, it's about getting to know the sport that they are in, what demands that places upon a person, what the language and culture is of that sport, so that I can get an overall picture to try and support them and help create an intervention that's going to then they can go out and work on themselves, that's hopefully going to bring them some benefit.
That's a really interesting point you made there, Helen, and that's sort of an area that I've sort of spoken to sports psychs and also coaches in the past in terms of an expert in the field. I sometimes feel that, be it a sports psychologist or be it a sports scientist, sometimes if they're an expert in the field of the sport, in a way they see it subjectively rather than objectively. Do you think there's a case for that sometimes, sort of, if you're not an expert in the field? Like, for example, I've seen, I'm not saying that all sports psychologists do this or sports scientists do this, but for example, sometimes what happens if they're an expert in the field, they sort of become subjective about maybe give advice that sort of crosses over the coaching barrier rather than sort of, stay within that sort of remit and mental skills. Do you think there is a case there for people wondering, well, I'm not an expert in that field? Do you think it's important that the sports psychologist does see it objectively rather than sort of get drawn into the coaching sort of side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the role of a sports psychologist is a difficult one, because absolutely you want to be able to kind of integrate into the environment that athlete is in, and not wanting to tread on the toes of a coach, being able to kind of blend into the background of the sporting environment that they are in, and I think it's also, as a sports psychologist, being able to recognise when maybe it's beyond your remit, and it's not something which it's appropriate for you to comment on or give advice on or guidance with, and I guess understanding the situation that athlete is in and knowing who you can signpost them to, who may be of better support than you can be, is also part of the role. You can't actually have an answer for everything all of the time.
Absolutely. And I suppose it's one of them, like, for example, say, this is, say, like a game like football, for example, where the coach has got a game plan or tactical, you've got tactical and technical side of the game, and I suppose there is also sometimes a temptation for the sort of sports psychologist to, or even sports scientists for that matter, to sort of cross over. And I think you've made a really, really good point there. Sort of knowing the remit is really imperative. And in terms of yourself, in the perception of sport, I mean, sports psychology has come a long way over the years, particularly in the UK. I can remember, going back, years ago, where I suppose a generalisation, but it may have been seen in some quarters, if you brought a sports psych in, it could have been a sign of weakness for the athlete. But now it's imperative. Now, at least in sort of Olympic sports, every sort of team has someone who deals with this side of things, and football now sort of come a long way too. In your perception, do you think it's changed sort of sports psychology over the years in terms of where it was before to where it is now?
Yes, I mean, and I think it's changed in the time since I've done my training. It's been changing all the time over the years, and I actually think it's healthy for sports psychology, that there is a bright future for sports psychology. Sport is such a changing, dynamic environment, and I think it's always going to be moving forward. I mean, just the situation that we now find ourselves in with COVID-related events that are happening in terms of how to manage social distancing, how to perform without crowds. These are all challenges and demands that are going on right now, and sport will always change and evolve with times to come. So I think people have recognised that there is a value in having sports psychology support because of that changing environment, and I think it's become more important for elite and Olympic level athletes to seek out sports psychology support, but actually I find in my experience that there are an awful lot of young people who are going through performance pathways in this country, have been selected because of their ability, and they're managing academics and school life as well as being involved in elite sport, and just managing the demands of that is very, very challenging. So having an extra kind of support that's a sounding board away from your parents or away from your coach, away from the wider network of your sport, can be really valuable for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that the more support you can get, the better it is, really, in being able to speak to someone about performance. And you made some really good points there. What I found really interesting at the moment is sort of the variation in performance in terms of possibly not being a crowd and the other pressures that are involved in life at the moment. But we've seen some really interesting results in sport. Do you sort of, in your sort of field, are they variables at the moment, Helen, that you're taking into consideration in terms of preparing your athletes, where we're in a sort of a new world, so to speak, that we've not really seen these sort of challenges in the past, like stop and start and training and sort of all this sort of uncertainty? Are these sort of areas that you've had to sort of work with athletes around as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think, in this kind of COVID period that we've been in, we're all getting better at learning to deal with uncertainty. And actually in sport, even in usual times, there is a huge amount of uncertainty in sport. So, I think everybody is getting better at dealing with that. But, it's a continual process. I'm working with athletes who are hoping to be going to an Olympic Games next year, athletes who are hoping to have a boat race, and there isn't any certainty about any of those things at the moment. And they've not prepared in that environment before. So, managing and keeping motivated and the not knowing is all can be difficult on challenging days to try and keep yourself motivated when you don't actually know if you're going to be competing. So I think it's an ongoing process for people, and I've spoken to a lot of athletes in this time, and it's very, very difficult, and a lot of people are finding it difficult, and I think we'll continue to go as the situation continues to evolve as it is.
Yeah, and absolutely, and it's a really important point that you've made there, some sort of really key points. I suppose the sort of backdrop of the COVID situation for an athlete, from a duration point of view, no one knows how long it's going to go for, the outcome, what the outcome's going to be, the pathway out of the situation we're in, and I suppose on a micro level, you're sort of preparing yourself day in, day out. You're not sure 100% whether the event's going to take place, how it's going to take place, and there's so many variables. And also there is the other thing as well, in terms of obviously contracting COVID as well, and there's so many variables. And at the moment, from your point of view as a sports psychologist, do you find that sort of a whole new challenge? And how have you sort of adapted the work that you do? Say, pre-March, I'm sure the work you do may have been a little bit different to now in some areas. Have those variables really influenced what you do with the athletes, Helen?
Yes. I mean, I think it is at the moment. I think being able to project forward and to think about the future can bring a lot of anxiety for people, a lot of anxiety, as I mentioned, in terms of, am I actually going to be competing? Am I actually going to be doing this race or this match that I'm wanting to do? So I've done a lot of work with athletes about keeping in the present moment as much as they can. What can I do today? What can I do this week? Remembering why they're in the sport in the first place. What they get from it, what they enjoy from it, and trying to take it back to process a bit more. Hopefully they are going to be able to compete at the Olympics, or they are going to be able to do the boat race. But until then, what can they do to be the best that they can be at the moment? How can they continue to get enjoyment and see small steps of progress at the moment? Yes, they might not be able to be able to see, how well their training is going because they're not able to actually perform, which obviously can affect people's motivation, because races, etc., can be a very big thing for motivation. So it's about kind of taking it back to the present, taking it back to today, taking it back to all the little things, the steps that people do in order to get better at their sport and what they're doing, and get some satisfaction from that and enjoyment from that.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And in terms of yourself, where do you see the future of sports psychology going? Obviously, it's been very heavily influenced by, obviously, I'm sure it's going to be influenced by the circumstances we're in at the moment. But just generally speaking, Helen, where do you see sports psych, going from where it is now?
Where I'd like to see it go, I think, is that there's a consistency of approach, and that maybe gone are the days of just bringing in a sports psychologist to give a one motivational speech and then that person goes away again, and that there is a kind of a drip feed of information over a period of time to try and help support longer term change. So it's not just a quick fix. It's here is somebody that can come in, they can help support us, they can help to influence our athletes and our environment, help us to work towards our goals and what we are doing, and that's a continual thing. It's evolving all the time. It's trying to learn about the people within the team, or learn about the individual and how they can make progress themselves, and do that over a period of time, and learn to think in effective ways that are going to be helpful for them moving forward whenever they're faced with challenges or uncertainty or adversity, all the things that are inevitable in sport, but they can learn to manage and deal with them better. So I guess for me, I'd like to see that consistency of approach that sports teams, athletes, individuals take with their psychology, that it's not just, I have a problem, let's quickly fix it and then I'll forget about it, that it's actually this, what I call this drip feed, that goes on over a period of time. That's where I think you can really see the longer term benefit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And do you find that you work with, say, I mean, obviously you work with people at the very highest level, but do you find that there's people out there who look for sports psychologists, like recreational athletes and people who maybe are semi-professional and sort of just want to improve their sport? So you've got someone who's sort of playing sport on a recreational level, just wants to improve their game a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love about my job, is that, one morning I can be working with, a Paralympic champion, and the next time I can be working with somebody who is trying to get fit and trying to, learn to run a 5K, for example, as a first challenge. And it's not somebody who's in a sports club or in a team. They're just doing it individually, and they're wanting to better themselves. So it's a real range, and I think that's the beauty of sports psychology, is that it can benefit everybody, and everybody can learn about what they're like and how they want to perform to their level, and to get enjoyment from it themselves, and try and improve, no matter what sport you're in or what level or who you're doing it with. That actually it can benefit so many people in so many different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get the sense that skills are transferable to life and business too, in sort of general, where, let's say, for example, someone has some of the challenges that you've talked about there from a business point of view. Is it sort of possible to sort of transfer some of these skills to, say, business, in terms of motivation, confidence, some of the variables that impact the athletes that perhaps impact?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I was just the other day, I was talking to an athlete who'd had anxiety before a race, and this was an athlete who, spent a lot of time kind of with what I call kind of catastrophizing type thinking. Where am I going to come, and what if I lose, and that person's going to be faster than me, and the people that I'm racing against look all quite scary. And we'd done some work around managing that anxiety and coping in that situation, and bringing it to her and what she was doing in the skills that she needed in order to try and do the best race that she could do. And in the same week, she was having to give a presentation with work, and all these people were filing into the hall where she was giving this presentation, and she found or noticed, because she'd been aware of it and talking about it with me, that I'm catastrophizing. I'm thinking, what's these people thinking of me? What are they going to think about my talk? Am I going to mess it up? And we're getting similar kinds of thoughts to like she was having before she had the race, and again it was about switching her self-talk to and relaxing, and so using some of the skills pre-race, which was some breathing techniques, engaging with people prior to the race or prior to the talk to help her feel more at ease with the situation, and recognising that these people wanted to be there. She wanted to be at the race, and so that they are, I think, transferable. And I think this athlete was quite surprised when she came and saw me the following week and said, I used all the skills that we talked about for my presentation. There was nothing to do with sport, and it's great when I mean, I have a lot of young people who say similar things to me about exams at school. When they're preparing for GCSEs or A-levels, that actually a lot of the skills that we talk about in helping them with sport can help them at school. And I don't think they thought that when they first come and see me, but they kind of can see the wider picture as they invest time in it. And I think that's another key thing for me about sports psychology, I guess, in the future, just to go back to one of your earlier question, is that actually, it is something that can pervade into other aspects of your life, and that I like to think is beneficial to people.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I mean, it's quite inspirational how you sort of transition across from being a teacher, I think, and I think that's sort of great stuff. I think it's always difficult to sort of change careers in that respect, but you sort of went for it, and you've done exceptionally well, Helen. Credit to you. And in terms of going forward, what's sort of your vision? I mean, you help all these athletes and people map their sort of vision, and you're able to sort of share, where you sort of go from here. You've sort of achieved a lot in the field. What's your sort of vision going forward?
Do you know, a lot of people ask this question. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And I think I don't actually really have a plan. My plan at the moment is to keep enjoying what I'm doing and have a wide variety of things that I do, which I do. I do have an idea, actually, of trying to bring some sports psychology into education. And I was just talking about it, actually, with some people this morning. And I'm one of these people, I like to have a project on the go. I like to have ideas.
Yeah.
And I think there's part of me that would like to give back to the education system because I'm not working in it anymore. And I think having been a teacher and now working in sports psychology, I'd like to do some kind of sports psychology work within primary schools, within PE lessons that can, educate young people with these principles in a kind of engaging and creative way. So I've got, I'm speaking to a few people at the moment, and I've got a few ideas. And so if any of your listeners have any ideas about that,
absolutely.
I'd be very excited to hear them, because I do think that's something that I feel quite passionate about doing, is giving back to education.
Yeah.
So yes, it's in the initial stage, very much the initial stages at the moment, but I like to have a plan, so I'm thinking it through at the moment.
Absolutely. No, I think that certainly young people would benefit, and with your experience of being a teacher and sort of really understanding that, I think the two would definitely amalgamate, really, really well. I'm speaking of sort of, the listeners. Is there sort of a contact, if anyone's sort of listening in, thinking, well, perhaps they'd like to get in touch in regards to sort of anything like that, or maybe know more about the work that you do, Helen? Is there any way they can sort of, get in touch with you?
Yes, well, the best way really is through my website, that you can go to the contact form through there, which is think.believe.perform.co.uk. Send me an email and get in touch. That's pretty much how most athletes tend to find me. You can see an awful lot of work that I do on my website. There's videos on there, there's articles that I write, and if people are wondering about, the wider things within sports psychology that I've not maybe covered in this conversation, then it might be worth having a look on there to see some of the things that I do.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such a broad area, and we could sort of, run a show for the next however many hours, really, and sort of still only scratch the surface. But I think it's, been really fascinating, that's for sure. So I really want to thank you for coming on board the show, Helen. It's been fascinating, to hear your insights, and no doubt our listeners have sort of, really taken a lot from the show. So thanks for coming on board the Friday Sports Show, 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio. If you host Jimmy Petruzzi, that was Helen Davis, Chartered Sport Psychologist, who works with some fantastic athletes and also works with people on various levels too, and consults, governing bodies as well, like Swim England. Really fascinating insight into her work. Thanks again, Helen, for coming on board the show. Great to have you on board.
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed it.